we are doing an all-girls Kapow special because it's International Women in Comics Month, which is an awesome month to celebrate. Yes. So I have obviously invited my awesome women to have a bit of a chat. Now look, we're going to talk about how women are represented in comics. Yes, it is a huge topic. It is so broad, and it is certainly not going to be resolved in the next 5 minutes of us having a bit of a chat. But it's an important topic that needs to be spoken about. It needs to be talked about, and definitely, you know, who better to talk about than these three girls? So, all right, ladies.
No pressure.
No pressure. Ladies, the big broad question first. How do you think women are represented in pop culture? So not just in comics, but in films, TV, anything to do with our wonderful geeky world.
Obviously, there is room for improvement. There's always room for improvement. But as a broad generalisation, women in pop culture compared to women in the regular mainstream sort of celebrity culture, I feel like we're far better represented. You see more female protagonists, you see more complex female characters, you see more women kicking ass. Can I say that?
You totally can.
Excellent.
Totally can.
Yeah, I do feel though a little bit that there's kind of a divide. You can either have your female protagonists who are very caring and sort of almost the damsel in distress, or you can have your protagonists who are the butt-kicking, take no names, you know,
Kickers.
the kickers, exactly.
Yeah,
It's a
their
great
job is
term
to
for
kick.
them.
They're both
exactly.
really representative of everyday women, though. I think there is a softer side to a lot of females, but there's also we want to get out there and kick butt too.
Yeah. I just wish there were more female characters who sort of tread the line between the two, who have the butt-kicking side and also the caring, kind family side.
Yeah, less generic, strong female characters and more complex, you know, real
characters. And this is the thing that I find quite interesting because, I mean, it's not just girls, there are boys in comics as well. And our favourite characters like Batman, like Superman, like, you know, Hawkeye, gosh, even Deadpool to a certain degree. I know. They're all complex characters with a range of issues, problems, struggles that the women don't seem to have. They seem to have a relatively easy or really hard life, and there is nothing in between.
Yeah, and I find that a lot of the females who are the butt-kicking type always have to have that backstory of having a really hard time of it. And I found that a lot with the reboot of Lara Croft. I really disliked that they gave her a really hard time because otherwise she couldn't have been an archaeologist. You know, she had to have that hard time to have a reason behind going into a, you know, generally male profession, and I would have rather had her go into it just because that's what she liked.
I feel like it's still a vast improvement on the absolutely no story whatsoever, but oh boy, look at that hourglass figure.
Well, hourglass or like triangles.
It's like a hard angled hourglass.
But that does bring up another really interesting point. I mean, the artwork in comic books can sometimes border on the, well, you know, slightly pornographic, especially in some titles. And there's always a lot of kind of conversation and sometimes furor over female costumes. Just recently, Scott Campbell had some rather strong words to say about Wonder Woman's latest costume. Now, if you don't know who Scott Campbell is, he's probably most well known for Danger Girl, but also he does a fairy tale calendar, you were saying,
That's
Beck.
right, he does a fairy tale calendar which takes the female leads from fairy tales and sexualizes them.
Yeah, so he's very much you know, he is a TNA guy, let's be honest here. And he's not a fan of Wonder Woman's costume. And he's gotten such a big backlash because he dared to say he didn't like it. Now, I can't help but think he's entitled to his opinion. We are a social media world, we tweet what our opinions now. Is it okay for people to come back to him and say that you don't have the right to say that?
Oh, no. I think everyone is actually, you know, everyone's entitled to an opinion as long as it's, you know, not hurtful or, you know, bigotry or all those sorts of horrible things. I think the way that he's gone about it, though, it comes across as incredibly defensive.
Sure.
For obvious reasons. You know, I think he's seeing costumes move into a more practical, kind of realistic, some would even say, path, which is the opposite of what his art design generally is.
Sure.
So that's kind of what I've picked up in his
At the same time,
criticism.
though, he has recently done a cover for SpiderGwen, which is a very practical
Absolutely.
costume, and I really feel like it's really his stylistic point of view that he's trying to put out there. I don't think he has any issues with women being dressed less provocatively in general. It's just his stylistic viewpoint that he's putting out.
They're definitely not shoulder pads, though.
No, they're pauldrons. They're not 80s. It's not a power
Clearly
suit.
pauldrons. They're a
there.
weapon.
They do stuff.
I love the new costume. Look, I look at it and I think that is something I could wear at a con and be warm. Awesome thigh-high boots that I could wear but not feel over-sexualized.
Yeah.
I'd feel comfortable wearing that when I'm talking to little girls being Wonder Woman without their parents looking at me going, oh gosh, is this who my daughter's meant to look up to?
Yeah, I think it's a redesign that's actually looking at the history of the character and what she does, and taking that to the level of, well, this is what someone in the 21st century would wear while they're doing their job.
Yeah, definitely. I do think, though, that it's an interesting look at how men are perceived when they do take issue with something that a woman is wearing, whether that's it being under-sexualized or over-sexualized. I think that everyone, male or female, has a right to have their opinion, especially in something that is so subjective.
Yeah, well, and that's what we have to always remember. Ray, just bringing up with your cosplay and being in conventions, that's a good point, talking to little girls at conventions, being dressed as a comic book character. How, this is the next thing, this is the next step that we need to take in how to make those girls and their parents feel comfortable letting their girls go to conventions, dress up. How do we get them to realise that this is not a male-dominated world anymore? The demographic of comic book readers are actually predominantly women and teenage girls. We are so entrenched in this stereotype of the fat comic book guy from The Simpsons, or the awkward,
Big Bang
teenager,
Theory
or
guys.
Big Bang Theory.
But that's never been the case.
Never. And yet
know one guy
it's got such a hold on this world that we are struggling to kind of break. What's the way forward, ladies? How do we get girls to go, you know what, I've watched Agent Carter, I think she's awesome, how do I get into that world? How do I start reading even, Captain America?
Yeah.
That's where you're going to go with Agent Carter. You're going to get into Captain America.
Yeah.
You watch the Avengers, you read Black Widow.
Yeah.
How do we get these girls to go, yeah, you know what, this is an awesome world, you need to be in it, and here's where you start.
We need the existing female comic readers to be more vocal about reading comics, particularly ones that are comfortable with being vocal about it and are comfortable with it, and are okay to get into interactions with the gatekeepers that say that they shouldn't be there, because we vastly outnumber the gatekeepers and we can silence the gatekeepers over time. I think being more open, being more vocal about what you're doing, and making it more obvious that it is a place where there are a lot of women.
It all starts with sharing. Like,
Absolutely.
A woman in your life that likes reading, likes fantasy, that sort of different world, then share a comic book with them.
Definitely. And I think that realising that women who read comics don't just have to read female-centric comics. No. It's amazing to me how many people go, oh, you're a girl who reads comics, you must read something that has a female protagonist in it.
It's like you can only read Wonder Woman, or you can only read Catwoman, or
Exactly.
Names ending in woman and girl.
Exactly. Whereas I think it's more important to search for something that you already enjoy. So if you already enjoy movies that are about assassins, if you already enjoy movies that are about spies or movies about superheroes, then just go for that genre of comic book, because there's a great chance that you're going to enjoy the comic book as well.
I think comics are a lot more accessible these days as well.
Definitely.
If you're a woman or a girl that might be a little bit intimidated about walking into a comic store, it might be, I don't know why. They're amazing.
Intimidated.
But there is that kind of perception that it's a dark basement-y place where you're going to walk down and instantly be quizzed by the guy behind the counter on your nerd cred. If that's a bit intimidating, download one of the many apps that you can read comics on. Become familiar with things. Try some series out, and then come in and pick up a big, thick graphic novel.
There are so many web series that are like online blogs and Tumblr and things like that have amazing comics, and a lot of really feminist-led comics too.
I mean, that's the thing. Facebook is a great tool to kind of connect with people who are in the world, either cosplayers or writers, creators. There's a great one called Valkyries, which is run by women who work in comic book shops. Like, these places are not scary.
No.
Girls do work here, and we would love for you to come in and pick up a comic.
Yeah.
Look, that we can literally talk on and on and on. We've covered quite a broad range of topics, and there are still more topics to be spoken about, more costumes to pull apart and put back together again. The fact of the matter is, everyone, I think, would agree that be vocal with your fandom. Say you love it.
Do it.
Whether it's a movie, a comic book, a book, anything, be vocal and allow people into your world. Because it's wonderful to share.
And you make so many friends.
Yep.
Yeah.
The idea that it really is a totally guy-centric thing is nonsense. I didn't even know that comics were meant to be for boys until I was older. My nan got me into comics.
That's awesome.
I thought comics were for everyone, and guess what? They are.
I wouldn't know you guys if I didn't read comics.
I wouldn't know any of you guys if I didn't read comics.
See, this is what happens when you have an all-girl special. Guys, thank you so much for coming on and having a chat about these really important topics that need to continue to be spoken about.
Definitely.
Kapowians out there, you're all awesome, you're all lovely. Comment on the YouTube, comment on the Facebook, the Twitter. Get the word out there that comic books are not scary places for girls, but a warm, welcoming area that everyone can enjoy.